And what are the questions you have to ask and then try to find answers, which you should be doing in this election year because it's a critical election year. The questions you should ask me and ask yourself and ask the other candidates is something fundamental, not what am I going to get? There's no more getting, there's nothing there left. Government gives you nothing. Government only takes from one person and gives to somebody else. So never let anybody use the fact that government is going to give you something. Only taxpayers, people who are productive, give you things because they have things taken away from them. So you have to ask, we have to reassess our values. This is the point of 1988. There will be a reassessment, there will be a realignment, but it could be in a dangerous direction or it could be in a very healthy direction toward freedom. The question is, what is the role of government? What is the purpose of government? Should the government be regulating and controlling the economy? Should they be in charge of a money supply where it has no meaning, no definition, and the politicians can print it? I mean, we have a system of government today that says the politician gets reelected by voting for things for the people. And the more he votes for them, the more likely he is to be reelected. Deficits don't have any meaning because they send the bills to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve prints up all the money and creates the credit. Can you imagine giving the power of the printing press to anybody in this room? I mean, everybody would call it counterfeit, would want to put them in jail. But what do? We turn it over to the politicians and the bankers. And yet the politicians and the bankers rate the lowest on the popularity scale. But we as an American people, and you and I, have to make a decision. Is that what we want from our government? Do we want them to continue to intervene and to spend and regulate and run a welfare state? Of course, the libertarian answer is very clear. We don't want that. We want what was intended in this wonderful experiment. You know, freedom. Freedom has only been tested that much in all of history, just a small amount of it. The best experiment was here, but the test is running its course. And if we don't reassess our values, and if we don't reassert them, you can expect this experiment to disappear. And that's what this is telling us now today about the stock market crash and the financial crisis that we're on the verge of. So what should the role of government be? If it isn't to regulate the economy, and if it isn't to tell you how to be a better person, what is the purpose of government? Well, we have to start off with a fundamental premise about rights. What are rights? To me, individual rights means that every one of us has a natural, God-given right to our life and to our liberty and to the fruits of our labor. And government has the only obligation, the only reason we bring government into effect is to guarantee that you have a right to your life, the right to your liberty, and the right to the fruits of your labor. And that's it. But most people now think, well, government's there to give us our freedoms, to provide for us, to take care for us, to give us food stamps, build our houses, give us medical care, give us an education. And this whole idea of rights has been completely distorted in the 20th century. So when we lost our way by losing the definition of what rights are, then we literally set the stage in a philosophic sense for Republicans and Democrats to endorse one system of government, the government of intervention. Yes, different flavors and different weights on different interventions, but government intervention. And that's only a 20th century phenomenon, especially since the Woodrow Wilson era. Since that time, we have had the expansion and the rapid growth of the welfare state. That is, the transfer of wealth from one group to another. Those who produce must take care of somebody else, not because they're being generous, but because the government holds a gun at their head and says, if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to jail. It has gotten so bad now and has been so serious of a problem to this country, we have more than a third of our people participating in the underground economy. Which means they say, I'm sick of it all. I'm copping out. I'm opting out of the system. I'm not going to pay the taxes and follow the regulation because I'm tired of it all. I, as a political activist, says that is not the answer. The answer has to be, as long as we have the freedom to come together, people like myself allowed to express myself, to be running for Congress and to get elected and run for president means that we have to go through the political process of not disobeying the law, because a nation disobedient law cannot survive. But it is to change the law, to get rid of the bad laws, to obey the Constitution, to have sound money, to have free enterprise, and to have your civil liberties. But to find the civil liberty is certainly different. So therefore, government is there for the guarantee of something which is a natural gift to you, a God-given gift to your life to be left alone. Therefore, the government cannot be in the business of welfare. So we, on principle, on ethical, moral, constitutional principles, reject the whole notion of the transfer of wealth because we consider it theft. If you as an individual can't steal from your neighbor, why is it that we have come to accept the idea that we can send our congressman to do the stealing for us? So under those circumstances, you can expect nothing more than more problems and more deficits and more spending. The purpose of government should be to guarantee your liberty. Now, if we guarantee your liberty as an individual, that means you have civil rights to live your own lifestyle. You actually can do things that I might disapprove of, but I'm very tolerant. As a libertarian, I say, well, I might not endorse your lifestyle. You may smoke some things and drink some things and eat some things and act certain ways that I totally abhor. But as long as you don't hurt anybody else, I'm not going to bother you. You actually literally have the right to be self-destructive in this situation. But if government assumes the role of protecting you against yourself or protecting you against what you smoke, literally they have to get rid of alcohol and tobacco and caffeine and limit calories and put you all on exercise programs and all this. Complete nonsense. But we don't want that, so we just apply those principles across the board consistently to everything. That as long as you don't hurt other people, drinking is okay, but drunk driving isn't okay. And there's a distinction between that, but we allow you to participate in activities that we might not ourselves endorse. So therefore, personal lifestyles are your own business, and also what you read and what you study and what you look at is your own business, and also your religious beliefs. We would never, as libertarians, ever conceive of the notion that some religion could be called a cult, and therefore you would have a different tax advantage, which is going on all the time, and we've prosecuted against certain religious cults because our government decides, well, they're not really religions. That does not happen in a libertarian society. But the purpose then of government would be to guarantee that liberty, but what kind of a market economy would you have then? You would have to have a free market. You'd have to have a free enterprise system because all associations, all transactions would be voluntary. The buyer and the seller has to come to a mutual agreement. The employer and the employee, two people get together and have a mutual agreement. Nobody is ever compelled to accept anything they don't want to. And once the agreement is made, they have to fulfill the agreement. There has to be some respect for the personal agreement. So what kind of an economy? There has to be a free market. Now, we defend that morally and constitutionally, but the magnificent part about this is the practical, and that is that's the most prosperous society. That's why we have been the richest country. That's why, tragically, in many ways, the interventionists, the government people, the planners, the welfarists have gotten away with so much. It's because freedom has given us so much. But they're using it, but they've expended it, and now we're broke. So that's why the reassessment has to come in. But the wonderful part about this whole philosophy of individual rights is that you will have an economy that will produce the greatest amount of abundance, the least amount of poverty and suffering. It's very clear if you look at the government records. The record of the government programs. If you have the government in housing, you get less houses. More people are homeless. If you give them food stamps, more people are hungry. If you give them medical care, the higher the cost of the medical care, the worse the medical care. If you have government running education, the worse the education gets. It's systematic. This can be applied in foreign policy as well. If we're not interventionists with you as individuals, and you can do as you choose, and we apply this to economics and you have free market, if we apply this to the military and to foreign policy, you come up with the same solution. We do not interfere. We do not intervene for ethical, moral reasons as well as constitutional reasons, but what are the practical results? The practical results of a non-interventionist foreign policy is a lot better chance for peace. You know, we never fought any foreign wars prior to the 20th century. Something, you know, happened in this 20th century. We changed our foreign policy. We changed our monetary system. We changed our tax system. Since Woodrow Wilson, we've had the income tax, we had the Federal Reserve System, and we had a foreign policy that Woodrow Wilson defined as make the world safe for democracy. Has the world been safe? Has it been democratic? It's more socialist, communist than ever before, and we're broke. We can't even afford it anymore. But it is not a good policy because it doesn't work. It always backfires. And what did we do with the Philippines? The Philippines is a perfect example of the disaster of our foreign policy. Can you expect the Republicans or the Democrats to change it? No, it's identical. It'll stay the same. It's been that way for 50 years. And that is, send money. And if it gets out of hand and the communists look like they're going to take over, send the kids. Would you let the Philippines follow the communists, they would say? Send the kids. Grab up the 18 and 19-year-olds. Give them a rifle. Go to the jungles. Go to the marshes of the Philippines. Save the world from communism without reassessing the values. Why is there a major chance for the communists to win in the Philippines? Because the Republicans and the Democrats have been sending money for decades to Marcos, a hated dictator who finally was kicked out. At the same time we gave money to Marcos, causing resentment among the people of the Philippines, causing poverty in the Philippines, then we came along with another government intervention which made it even worse. That intervention was putting a tariff on the sugar so that they were then even more impoverished. No wonder there was resentment against the Americans. No wonder there's growth of communism. And now, what will the answer be? Republican or Democrat? Will be to draft the young people and tax you even more. Our answer to this is prevent it. Change the policy. Look at what the Founding Fathers said. Don't get involved in entangling alliances. If there's any one thing I would like to suggest to you as a young group, is to reassess what we've done, to reassess what you're getting. It's your country. You are free individuals. You're allowed to run for office. You're allowed to participate. You're even allowed to become libertarians. You should reassess and say, what about these treaties? Are they any good? You know, we were attacked in Pearl Harbor. We went to war. We won the war, and you'd never know it. Japan now owns Waikiki Beach. And we're paying for all their defense. And they're killing us in the market. They lower their taxes. They subsidize their export, and we never stop. Their oil supply gets threatened in the Persian Gulf, so what do? We rush over there to protect their oil supply and endanger, really, the true free flow of oil out of the Persian Gulf. It's been much more dangerous since our Navy's been there. It's a foreign policy of folly. It's a foreign policy designed for war. And it's an economic policy designed to cause recession, depression, protectionism, and isolationism, and that's what we're going to get unless we change our values. Your job will be to decide what should the role of government be, what can we offer, do we have to live up to all those treaties, can we get out of those treaties, can we have a different foreign policy, should the role of government be there to guarantee that you can make a living again, or is it going to guarantee that every year your Social Security tax is going to go up, and every year your income tax is going to go up? That's what you're inheriting. So I challenge you to think about these issues and decide that there is a better way. And the better way is a wonderful, beautiful philosophy. It's the philosophy of freedom, something that was introduced to America a couple hundred years ago and was in many ways outlined in the form of our Constitution. I think it would be quite proper that this year we read the Constitution. I think we should read it every 200 years, whether we like it or not. Let's look at the Constitution, figure it out, sit down and read it, and decide whether that's the kind of government you want. I happen to believe in limited government. I happen to believe in individual freedom, not only because of the moral principle behind it, but for the humanitarian aspects of what libertarianism brings. It brings a prosperous, free society. It brings you honest money. It brings you full employment. It brings you a system of government that allows people to have an incentive to get ahead. And most importantly, at least highly important, is the fact that it's the system of government that allows us the best chance for peace. And certainly in this age where we are threatened with a nuclear holocaust, we certainly don't need 20 or 30 or 40,000 more nuclear warheads. I think 100 or 2 of those might be plenty. And therefore there's no reason to continue with this process of ever building up. So I say, look into these, make your decision, and please come down on the side of voting for freedom, vote for liberty, vote for the libertarians. I thank you very much.